We are continuing our studies this week, and we're celebrating the Jewish New Year. So I joke around every year we celebrate 3 for the last 13 years. Diwali, the Indian New Year, our New Year, January 1st, and then the Chinese New Year. And this year it is official. We have added the Jewish New Year to our celebrations here. And I've always loved the traditions of the Jewish culture, but in particular this one I think is really beautiful and important. And it came at such a perfect time for us because we've been studying love and compassion and the vagus nerve and opening our 4th chakra up, and then the Jewish New Year has this beautiful practice of forgiveness, and we can't possibly open ourselves up wide to love if we're not able to forgive. So this past week we've been throwing bread and into the ocean and letting go and casting away those things we need to shed before the new year. And I've been asking all of you and myself to look around our lives and see where we might need to forgive ourselves or another person, or ask for forgiveness. And these can be like little things, like just things that pop up for us during the day, or things that we've carried around with us for years. But you know, I was just sharing with all of you that I consider love to be a practice. You know, if you're in with your family or a friendship, or especially a partnership with someone, that when you agree to love someone, it's a daily practice and how we do that. And so I believe just as love is a practice, so is forgiveness. And the best of relationships and friendships and partnerships and marriages are ones where you can just constantly forgive and let go of things and move on to that freshness that we want in a relationship. So we're continuing that this week, as the tradition is going to go all the way through Saturday, and then we'll do a little bit of a puja here on Sunday. If you guys would like, you can do the fasting on Saturday as well. And this week with the Shala, what I'd like to do is have everyone consider that asking you to look at where in your life you need to forgive or be forgiven is something that's cognitive. We think about it, you know, we hold that thought and think, where do I need to let go of something, you know? And one of the analogies I used with you guys was the Buddha's teaching of anger being like being angry at someone, like wanting to throw a hot coal at someone, but the only one that gets burnt is your hand, right? And then the sipping poison, which, by the way, we Googled who said the sipping the poison, and actually Nelson Mandela and Carrie Fisher and so many people said it that you can just Google that and see all the different people that have used that metaphor. But as we were thinking about that as something that we literally think about and look at within ourselves, there's a way in our yoga practice to really practice letting go and forgiving and moving into our lighter version of ourself without that cognitive process. And that is what? What do we do in our yoga practice every time we come here that allows us to let go and open ourselves up? Breathe. Number 1 is our breath. And in yoga, it's even more than that. We say prana. What is prana? The life force, the energy. So we do a very specific breath technique called Ujjayi breathing, so that we have that energy riding on the breath and moving through. And this is what we're studying this week. It moves through the different parts of our bodies through what we call nadis. 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 And you could kind of compare those to, in the Chinese tradition, meridians. So we kind of all understand how that works. It's like our electrical circuitry. Different than the vagus nerve, because I think sometimes we think of nerves as our electrical circuitry as well, but that can actually be measured physiologically. Whereas the nadis are interesting because we can't see them. We can't see breath or prana. We can't normally see breath unless it's really cold, right? But we can't see prana, but we know that energy is something that we can feel and that we can actually train to be better at holding our energy, managing our energy, creating more energy. So kind of a funny thing I always say here at the Shala is that if I could create, or if I knew someone maybe You are a scientist, so maybe you could create one for us. A prana machine. I always would want to have a prana machine where you guys could walk through class and stick your index finger in the prana machine and it would say, Dallas is reading at 75% energy today. You know, and then we do our 1 hour Ashtanga practice together, and then afterwards she puts her index finger back in and it says, Dallas is registering at 95% prana today. You know, so we know when our prana, it feels strong, or when it feels like we're holding it in well, and we kind of know when it's all over the place, or it feels really low, and we just, or when you're with other people, the more you do a practice like yoga, which is a pranic practice, you train, like I'm training my arms in chaturanga, I'm training my breath to stretch, I'm training my prana, and I get better at holding my own, but also reading prana. It's one of the ways that we move into the internal 4 limbs of the Ashtanga practice, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, where we move into an internal part of ourselves and skillfully get better at how we are able to tune in there. And when I do, I'm able to tune in with you better and with you better, right? Into a room, what's happening in the energy of a room better when I'm able to do that. So in order for us to do that, we really need something called the bandhas. So in order for me to be effective at moving energy through the nadis, or prana through the energy channels, I have to be able to lock them in so that I can do that. So we use 2 sealing mechanisms, mula bandha and uddiyana bandha. The perineal muscles contracting and the lower belly pulling in. And when I hold that center, then with my ujjayi breath, as I do asana or form, I can move that prana around. So then it moves me to the next area of study for us this week, which is the granthis. What are the granthis? So those are actually, it translates to the word knots. So it is a knot that creates a blockage. And when there's a blockage, the energy can't flow through, right? So if any of you have ever been to an Ayurvedic practitioner or a Chinese practitioner, oftentimes they'll start by reading your pulse. And one of the things they're reading of the 9 pulses they're listening for is where your energy is flowing and where it's blocked. And so we have a sense of that for ourselves as Ashtangis, that we do better when the energy is flowing throughout our bodies, and we do different things to try to activate that flow. Something as simple as oftentimes the Ashtangi does this particular lock with our big toe and our first 2 fingers and thumb, and that not only secures the shoulder and the leg to do some poses, but it also creates resistance and push through, and with the breath it helps create a beautiful lines of energy that move through the body with that. So there are 3 major locks in the yoga system. So there's one at the very base we call Brahma, Vishnu, and then also Rudra. Those are the 3 major blockages. So we're looking to that today, since we're studying love and compassion and the vagus nerve and the Jewish New Year, the tradition of forgiving and practicing forgiveness, is to look at the knots that we have in Pranavayu, or the 4th chakra, and where things might be blocked up, where we can release them. So in your practice today, without having any cognitive thought of what do I need to let go, what do I need to fix, what do I need to forgive, is we're going to breathe for 1 hour. And we're going to, when we breathe, do things like up dog and pull our shoulders down and all the way back, and try to get breath to really flow through this region from the bottom of the psoas muscles and the spine, and come up all the way through and then wide. And we're going to do forward bends, and instead of rounding our back and dropping our head, we're going to stay in extension. And again, try to move that prana all the way up and through as we're breathing. You know, I was saying, sometimes it's funny to me, like, hey, listen, you've come anyway, and you're going to be doing the poses anyway, right? You might as well give them like 95%, right? So rather than just doing triangle pose and kind of hanging out there, 4 breaths and triangle pose, but really coming into triangle pose with the most expressive or expansive form that you can in your chest and your spine, and rooting through the floor and reaching up, and then using that prana to run through all the edges of your body. And I guarantee you, if you do triangle pose, twisted triangle pose, extended angle, back bends, headstand, all your poses today with that intention today, that I want to move prana into these areas, you're going to leave here feeling more energy, So one of the things that happened for all of us, and I'll close on this note, is we've all come to practice before when we're just having a crappy day. You know, you just feel no energy, or you're mad about something a little bit, or a little bit irritated. And you come in here, and you almost didn't get here, but you did, right? And you get here, and something's running your head, but then you start doing your first sun salute, and your second sun salute, and then you're in standing poses, and then you get to back bends, and you realize you feel better, right? And you realize that whatever you're upset about, maybe you have a little more perspective or whatever when you're leaving here on it. And that's sort of the magic of the practice, but really it's the science of the practice too. It's just our intention of breathing and moving prana is really one major way that we can release and let go of things and free ourselves from some of the coal that we tend to hold. So for our quotes, we have the official Buddha quote by Buddha: holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. And then Carlos Castaneda said, we either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves strong. The amount of work is the same. And I want you guys to consider that this week as we're looking at forgiveness, because sometimes we hold on to stuff and we're just so upset about it. We're so irritated, and I was treated so badly. But with that same amount of energy, we could free ourselves and be moving on to the next thing that makes us feel good and better. Mr. Eckhart said, and suddenly you know it is time to start something new and trust the magic of new beginnings. And this brings us to our new year. New Year's practice: release knots, granties, and the little pieces of coal we hold, move energy, free up space for magic and new beginnings. Hong Kong.